All right, let's jump into what's going on with this Pelosi coronavirus relief bill. And the reason why I call it the Pelosi bill is because it has been basically fashioned by Pelosi, her office, and her handpicked committee chairs, all of whom represent the most conservative members of the Democratic Party. I mean, that's just simply the case, at least the ones that she went to look at to write this bill. And Pramila Jayapal, Mark Pocan, the two co-chairs of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and they represent about 40% of the members in Congress. I mean, that is why when you want to know why Pelosi et al. Are afraid of AOC and are constantly worried about that, is that they are very worried about the Progressive Caucus getting to 51% or 55%. And because then the calculations start to change dramatically for the Democratic Party. And that's, when you talk about these challenges that are happening in New York, we talk about like Jamal Bowman running in New York. I think, is it 16th? I'm not sure.
I know Elliot Engel. I know he's running against.
Against Engel. Yeah. Also, I've interviewed a couple of people from New York who are really good. In fact, Sam Elise Nomi was talking about her yesterday.
She's really good. I would like to mention Isaiah James. I'm a big fan of his as well. There are some very good candidates in New York.
There's some very good candidates in New York. And, you start talking 3 or 4 here and 3 or 4 there. Maybe we pick up 1 or 2 more progressives in California going forward. And so Jayapal basically got into it with Pelosi and wants to debate the bill. She released it yesterday. It is, I don't know, a 1,200-page bill. I got no problem with a 1,200-page bill if you allow people the time to read it, or at the very least, had there been a process that was ongoing that people had access to of the bill being developed. And there was not, because she has refused to bring people back and refused to set up any mechanism in which to have any debates about this. And so Pelosi says, no, we're going forward with it on Friday. I don't know that you're going to be able to see enough of a pushback by the Progressive Caucus that they would sink this bill. But there is no need to rush this thing, or I should say, there is no need to get it done this week as opposed to next week, because they've already said it's dead on arrival in the Senate.
Yeah, it's going to the graveyard. I mean,
well, it's like I will say this. This will exist because it will come a time, and it may be in a week or two, but it's probably going to be like in a month or two, where the Senate Republicans will have to decide that we've got to do something because the economy's cratering.
But there's no way that this is passing, this bill. Anything that the House produces, this or something better or something worse, is not getting passed by the Senate next week.
Okay.
So there isn't the time, right. That's all. That's all
not time sensitive right. In that way. Right. And then, okay. So you put that aside. So what is the point of this bill? The point of this bill is to send a message, to show the distinctions between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, to make the Republicans pay a political price for not doing these things. Right? I mean, this is a message bill, and I am all for message bills. I am all for, in this situation, when you can't pass it, I am all for things that are bound to lose, but will be effective politically. So what you would want if you were going to do an effective messaging bill, if you genuinely wanted a message bill, as opposed to a laundry list of stuff that you're going to be able to say to Jim in Indiana, Mary in Arizona, well, you can run on this and you can run on that. But if you want to nationalize the election, if you want to make Donald Trump look bad, which is going to be the way that any Democrat wins, in this election. It's because people coming out to vote against Donald Trump. That's what 2018 was all about, and everybody knows it. You would want this to be discussed at length. You would want there to be debate about this bill because you would want to present these different options to the American public. And that is not what Nancy Pelosi wants. And so we get stuff. And look, and if this is supposed to be a marker, this is supposed to be your opening salvo, you're going to go in and say, we're going to fund. Axios is reporting today that there are 27 million people who have lost their employer health insurance at this point. 27 million people. And the Democrats are proposing subsidizing insurance companies who are doing great, incidentally. They are doing fine during this.
They're soaring.
They're thriving.
They're thriving.
And
they're transitioning to greatness.
They're transitioning to greatness. And they're going to subsidize insurance companies by paying for COBRA, which is the single most expensive insurance product I think that they have ever made, ever, and exists. And so the government is going to subsidize this, presumably because Nancy Pelosi is so terrified of setting some type of marker that could actually help people that might exist after this, that they are willing to bust the bank, complain that other things may be too expensive, and do the most expensive option, the most cumbersome, most difficult, and the biggest giveaway to insurance companies.
I think this cumulatively, as written, is a $3 trillion package, if I'm not mistaken.
It's a
so this is
package.
not, I mean, you can't play that game. I mean, even Neil's alternative for paycheck protection versus Jayapal's basically trying to do what Denmark has done, which is just the government protecting people's wages while this is happening and getting cash directly to businesses and people without financial institutions as an intermediary. He said that her bill is too expensive. And I apologize. I don't have it in front of me, but like, you're talking a couple of, like, the difference between what he's proposing and what she's proposing is they're both in the multiple of hundreds of billions, right? Like,
his is like $300 billion.
And hers is like $600 billion.
650.
650.
Yes. And now,
yes.
Also note in this bill is the reversal of the Trump tax bill, not all of it, just the part about the state and local taxes exemptions. Now, this is a big deal for people living in blue states who are wealthy.
Right. Yep.
Now, there is an argument that this puts pressure on these states to lower taxes, but nobody's going to lower taxes in this instance. And all you're doing is putting money into something like 60 to 80% of the benefits of this go to the top 10% people. And this costs money. I don't know how much it is. It's not in any of the stuff that's been written up. I haven't seen the cost breakdown for it, but this costs it's probably the difference. Billions of dollars is probably the difference that would close that gap.
Yes.
In terms of the paycheck protection. We've already put out the paycheck protection program. And because, like you say, it's being handed out by banks, it's done incredibly inefficiently. It's not quick enough. And we could just do this tomorrow.
Yep.
Commitment to all these companies. We're going to pay. We know your Social Security rolls. We know what you are, who you're paying. We're just going to come in. We're going to calculate what your Social Security taxes have been over the past 8 months, year, whatever it is, on this payroll. We are going to send you that payroll as long as it gets to your workers, and boom, you're going to pay. And
incidentally, we've talked about how in the structural problem with so many aspects of this is that the institutions are designed. Basically, the easiest thing to do is just to juice the banks and monopoly companies. This is something that actually is logistically very achievable and would immediately help workers, and they're sitting on it. And what occurs to me, though, as I read this was, and I always make, I feel like I'm a broken record, but there's my, okay, expand Medicaid, okay, do the Jayapal bill, do the things that will actually help people. And then there's my second order, can you at least make this something effective and simple to communicate about? So if you just data 4 points that just said, okay, instead of COBRA, obviously, God forbid we do Medicare or Medicaid expansion, but let's open up the Obamacare exchanges, which frankly, compared to COBRA, would be more helpful. Then let's have another round of stimulus checks. It's not structural, but they do have it in the bill and you can make it a top line. I think there's another round of $1,200 checks for people. And I think there's a higher number for children. Instead of a kid getting 500, I think that number goes up. Basically, do what Bill Clinton did in 1996, which he took the two things, and I'm talking purely tactically here. He said, I'll do welfare and I'll do balanced budget or whatever the Republican stuff was polling well. And then unlike them, I'm going to put some money into education and protect some environmental programs that poll well, frankly, with the same suburban voters that they're tailoring this bill to right now. And they don't even have something that is just like a bullet point list that anybody can go out on TV and talk about.
No, I mean, she is largely doing this just to say that they did it. And here's the thing. This is what also gives away the game. Why wouldn't you at least offer up what Joe Biden is calling for? Right? Because you know Trump is going to reject it. You know the Republicans are going to reject it. The reason is because they don't want this to even be the baseline.
Yep.
They could say, let's do the public option in Obamacare. I mean, she could come out and say, we're going to give coronavirus care, which would actually just be done through Medicaid. You just expand Medicaid, but you call it something else. There is what can only be described as a purposeful decision to do nothing along the sorts, to offer nothing. In that regard, they come out and they say $875 billion for cash and for cash for state and local governments. Very important, because this is where austerity hits on the local level, regardless of what the feds do. That's very important. But again, that's not even 1/3 of the bill. $20 billion for each for tribal nations and $20 billion for U.S. territories. There's also measures, provisions to support multi-employer pensions. There is $75 billion to ramp up coronavirus testing and contact tracing. You throw that in to say that you did it because you don't want Mitch McConnell to say they didn't even want to do tracing or testing. Right. $75 billion for mortgage relief, $100 billion for renters, $25 billion for the U.S. Postal Service, $3.6 billion to shore up elections. I don't know what that means in terms of money, but I don't know if they're instituting vote by mail. You want to push that. There's another round of $1,200 checks for adults, up to $75,000 if you're making. Under this bill, kids would receive the same amount instead of $500. But again, there is no automatic economic stabilizers.
Right.
Which
they're not even just dumping. They can just, I think they are kicking up food stamps a little bit, but they could just even be shoveling an unlimited amount of money into the food stamp program.
I just want to reiterate what an economic automatic stabilizer is. You want to make sure that if Joe Biden wins, Mitch McConnell and the Republicans hold the Senate, that Mitch McConnell doesn't block attempts by Democrats to help the economy like they did in 2009. And the way you do that is you pass bills now that instead of saying this sunsets at a certain date, you say that it sunsets at certain economic benchmarks. This will end when we have 5% unemployment. This will end when we have 3% unemployment or 7% unemployment. But until that point, it continues on. They're not doing that.
And food stamps are a great example of that as a program.
They're going to allow cannabis businesses to expand access to bank accounts and loans. Good. Restoring the ability to deduct state and local taxes completely underpaid. That's just a big giveaway. That's just a big tax cut to wealthy people. That's all it is. And if you're going to give a tax cut, give it to people who are actually going to spend more of it.
Right.
Not to the wealthiest people that are there. On top of all this,
This is a protect our, because just in the way that the Republican bill in 2017 was a big wealth giveaway, but it also did specifically target, like, hey, if you're upper middle class in a state that votes Democrats, we're gonna hit you. And this is a clawback bill for that, and instead of a emergency stimulus during the pandemic.
Right. And there's some argument that money is some of it's gonna go into the economy, but not much. Because the bottom line is we don't have an economy.
Yeah, what more? I mean, how much more can people order online? I mean, I think folks who have that are already doing that.
I'm going to go and order I'm going to order a small house.
Right. I'll buy an office building on Amazon.
This Cobra subsidies. It's in the HEROES Act, they're calling it. Runs through January 31st, 2021. So as soon as Joe Biden is inaugurated, if everything goes well, then Mitch McConnell says, we're done subsidizing health insurance. Good luck to you. And then we're effed. Or Mitch McConnell loses the Senate, and Chris Coons is there. We must protect the filibuster at all costs. And so the Republicans filibuster any possible fix for health insurance for the millions upon millions of people who I don't care. I mean, let's just assume the virus goes away by August. It goes away like magic.
Yeah, it's just magic.
Against everything that we understand about science and viruses and any of this. We're still going to have tens of millions of people without health insurance on January 21st, 2021. And the idea that you would leave that up to the Republicans without, and understand what you're doing is also giving them tremendous leverage for you to do nothing. If you have some type of safety net that is there, that gives you room. They say go find another job when you have one. That's the dynamic. But no, they're not doing that because they are so terrified of creating any type of reform mechanism that is moving forward. I mean, this is the clearest example of Pelosi not just trying to lay low, but to make sure the understanding that they are also fighting a two-front war in their minds.
Oh, definitely.
They are fighting a growing progressive caucus and insurgency, and they need to fight that. Look, picking up in Nebraska second, Carrie Eastman won the primary last night. She lost her race by 2 points in 2018. When Donald Trump is on the ballot and Democrats come out, if they throw a little money there, she's going to win. And there's a vote for Medicare for all that you didn't have before. There's another person in the progressive caucus that wasn't there before. You start picking them up in Nebraska. Maybe you pick one up in California and in New York. And pretty soon, remember, we're talking about a Democratic Congress, 238 some odd people. 10 people makes a difference. Makes a difference when you're talking 40%. So they're worried, I think, in some level, and it's a real. And
it's their politics. I mean, there's no, they're worried and they're center right. I mean, there's no other way of describing their politics. And I think, it's important to understand. I'm also trying to follow specifically what's happening with Cuomo, because I read last night that potentially the bill is written in such a way that he could get some state aid and still cut Medicaid. But I'm seeing today that he might actually reject some of this aid so he can move forward cutting Medicaid. So I don't know, but that's another inspiring thread to follow here of a guy who's riding high, who apparently, I mean, look, New York is a complete disaster because of his leadership. And now he's, sees this as an opportunity to gut the public school system and cut Medicaid. But at any rate.
One other point, Sam, there isn't any sort of protection in there against raising the cost of ACA plans for 2020, right?
Not that I know of. I mean, that's the thing, is we get nothing for those huge subsidies that we're giving the insurance companies.
Right.
Nothing. Right. I mean, there's no one who's done like a deep dive on the text of the bill. It's 1,200 pages, and they're going to vote on it in 2 days. All right, let's just go through this